Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we are going to do some cut testing with the Spyderco Positron. This is a replica, by the way. This is not the real deal. I did do a full review. I'll put a link to it up there in the corner, probably down in the description if you want to see the full thing. I'm going to try to get through this pretty quick so we can get over to the cutting table. I will do the specs real quick. We'll talk about a couple of the pros and cons, and then we'll get to cutting, just in case you haven't seen it. Let me bring up the specs. Let me find my specs, actually, for this thing. I'll bring them up down the side of the screen here. This knife is, I'm going to say, a small knife. It's 7 inches max. This is true to that. The blade is 3 inches, so you're getting actually a lot of blade for a relatively small knife. I wear a size large glove, just a regular size large, and you can see I am just barely fitting on that. So XLs are going to have a little bit of trouble, and anything larger than that, yeah, it's going to be a 3-finger knife if you have really big hands. You cannot put your finger up here. We'll talk about that in just a minute. That's just not going to work for anybody, even us with smaller sized hands. Closed, it is 4 inches long. This is certainly a small EDC pocketable knife. The blade on the original one comes in at 120 thousandths. This one, however, is a good bit thinner at 103 thousandths. So that was an interesting choice that they made on this one. Handle thickness is about 1/2 inch. These are contoured, but they are thick, beefy, real deal solid carbon fiber all the way through. This is not at one of their higher quality carbon fibers, although it's true carbon fiber. You can kind of see it in the weave. It's actually left a little rougher than most of their carbon fibers, which gives it a little more grippiness. So that's a pro in my book as far as I'm concerned. It is a full flat grind. This is a stone-washed blade. The real deal comes in S30V. I have no idea what this is. What does this say it is? This says S30V, okay? This is not an S30V, I can guarantee you that. The weight on this thing, 2.5 ounces. So if you're looking for a tiny little, not taking up any space in your pocket kind of carbon fiber knife, great in the wintertime, doesn't get cold, this might be a good one for you. 35 bucks is what it costs on OK Knives. This is a liner lock. Well, I guess we can take a little closer peek at that. There you go. So it's probably about at the 50% mark, 45, 40, 50% lockup. Relatively thin on the lock bar, but certainly this is a thin blade overall, so I don't think you need much more. That certainly concerns me zero. I did measure behind the edge on this thing. This is 19 thousandths to 24 thousandths, depending on where you measure. Thinner back here, and it thickens up out there. Not terrible, not great. We're going to look at how sharp it is here in just a second, and that's the whole goal of this video today. Let's do a couple of size comps. Let's first do our little dollar bill trick. I've had a couple of y'all now say, hey, that's pretty cool. You should keep doing that dollar bill thing. So there you go. You can see this thing barely makes it off the edge of the dollar bill. That's a small knife. All right, let's get some other Spydercos. We always use the PM2 and the Para 3. Those are pretty standard comparisons. You can see this knife is even smaller than the Para 3. However, you get much more cutting length out of it, right? Just lining up the blades to the blades. That's the pro, is that you've got a really tiny, lightweight knife with a full 3-inch blade. So there is something to be said for that. Here you go against the Civivi Vision FG, obviously smaller than that, and the Ozark Trail D2. Let's talk about a couple of quick things before I take it over to the table. So this knife first came out, I think it was around 2014. The guy who designed this, guy by the name of Brad Southard, S-O-U-T-H-A-R-D, was the guy who designed Spyderco's first ever flipper knife with a flipper tab on it. Wasn't this one, it was a knife he designed right before this one, and they didn't really know if flipper tab knives would take off for Spyderco back in those days, and it did. Became very popular, and so he had designed a second one, and they said, all right, let's try this one too, and that's what this Positron is. It's kind of unusual to me in how normal and typical knife shape and style for a Spyderco knife that this thing is, right? Just a plain drop point blade. It's great for letter opening. Certainly thin and slicey. Pokey makes it, great package opener. No issues there. The scales are overly thick, in my opinion. It does have a little G10 backspacer there, but these are just solid slabs of carbon fiber, and then they do have milled liners on most of it. I don't know why they felt like they needed milled liners in there, steel liners at all. Certainly they make plenty of knives that are just straight up carbon fiber. Even my favorite, what is it, the native 5 and carbon fiber, is much thinner than this. So it's a little thicker than it needs to be, a little beefier than it needs to be. The flipper tab isn't great. It does have these little 2 jimps on it, but those are useless. You can't get to it. And the only way you can flip it is to push pretty hard. The detent's, I would say, pretty well dialed in, but you have to give good force right on the corner of that flipper tab. So it's not comfortable to sit and flip over and over again. It does bounce occasionally, like you just saw there. You do have to give it a little flip. It's not going to drop shut because it's such a thin and light blade. You do have to flip it. It does have kind of that nested, you can see, liner lock in there. There's a little bit of jimping. It is cut away a little bit so you can get somewhat easy access to it. Drop it to your thumb. Drop it down, no problem. This will probably go in a giveaway. I'm not a big fan that the clip is not centered. That's an unusual thing for most knives. I don't know why they wouldn't have done that. It is reversible, so that's pretty cool. Typical paper clip style, pocket clip. You know, I actually like the paper clip styles. I like that, and it keeps also the overall knife great. So not the best action or flipper tab. It's on steel bearings. You can kind of even hear that. You won't hear that in this video, but if you've had knives with steel bearings, you can tell there's a difference between steel bearings and ceramic balls, right? You do have to shake it to get it there. That hole is completely useless. There's absolutely no way you're going to grab that and flip it either front or back. So it's just basically there for design aesthetics purposes because it's a Spyderco and it has to have a hole. So they put a little tiny one in there that has no real purpose or use. They didn't even do a good job grinding it, and I didn't go back and resharpen it. It's a little uneven in the grind, which is often the case. You know, when you're dealing with replicas, like you've got a pretty thick grind. You can see it's pretty thick up here, and then it really thins down as it gets down to here. So you get that a lot with these cheap replica knives. Let's see about sharpness. It's good. It's not great. I'm going to call this, I hate to call it a 9. When you have knives that you have now reprofiled down to an incredibly slicey and thin blade that just zips through everything because it's been reprofiled and it's thin and slicey, then what you're getting here with this unsharpened version, although it'll probably shave hair, I'm now a snob. And so I'm going to call this a 9.5 because it's not as thin and slicey as so many of the other knives that I've sharpened. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get over to the table with our 9.5 blade and see how this thing actually cuts and does the edge hold up. And as always, we're going to start out with our cardboard cutting test. I got 390 square inches. There's really only one position that you can kind of grip this knife in, which is behind that front flipper tab / semi choil. It does cut through the cardboard really easily. I know it's maybe not hard to see when I'm going so fast on the video here, but it's a relatively thin knife, not too bad. It slices easily enough through cardboard. It was sharp enough to cut cardboard. You won't have any issues if that's your chore for this knife. That's what you mainly do with it. I think you'll be fine as long as the edge retention holds up. That's what the real question here is. But as far as cutting cardboard with it, nice, easy enough, as long as you don't have massive oversized hands. You can get a 4-finger grip on it, and relatively thin blade. Nice 3-inch blade, so you got plenty of cutting edge there. All good on that in terms of just its ability to cut cardboard. No big issues. Was a little lazy on my cardboard. I didn't take off all the tape. That KPL knife shield, I've shown this a few times. Good stuff, man. If y'all haven't had it, it's great for protecting D2 blades and blades that are prone to corrosion, but it also gets that tape off really easy. So here we go. First pass and got hung up. Second pass, we are not off to too good of a start here. Yeah, I was kind of worried about this. Hard to tell. Not a total disaster, but clearly this knife is a whole lot more dull than it was when we started. So that's not off to a great start, let's call it. I'm going to give this a 6, and let's keep on moving. So this is not a graded test. I will tell you one of the benefits of this knife. The tip of the blade is angled down, so these kind of draw cuts are very comfortable with this knife. So if you're opening a lot of Amazon packages, you want to cut cardboard and open Amazon packages, this knife is going to be great. You'll be very happy to have it. And again, nice 3-inch blade. Don't have to raise up too high. Did a fine job. No big issues there. Now, one of the things it doesn't have is a very big belly blade, so I was curious to see, am I going to be able to cut this hose without having much of a belly? And fortunately, because this is a reinforced, like a flex PVC pipe hose there, yeah, no problems there. People have asked me, why do you do all that extra chopping after the fact? And the answer is, I'm just trying to damage the blade. I've always done that much when I do my knife tests. So to be fair with all the other knives I've tested, I try to chop them all into quarters. That's my deal. All right, looking here at the sharpness. You know, it's not fair to judge the back side of the blade because I know the back edge of the blade is dull towards the handle. I only really cut with the tip here, so I'm really just needing to focus on, did I do more noticeable damage to the tip of this blade? And that's what we got to figure out here. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Grab another piece of paper. Ultimately, you can see from those last couple of passes, it doesn't look like it did much more, so I'm going to leave it as a 6, and let's keep on moving here. All right, on to the rope cutting. This is where the belly is going to become more of an issue, as you'll see here in just a second. First cut, not really a great start. You don't want to have to saw. A good sharp knife should just push down, basically pop through the rope. Now the rope's not cooperating because it's fraying. I've had this problem with the last couple, but if you had a really sharp knife, it would slice right through that pretty easy. So I had to give up on trying to cut it flat, and I got to raise it up on the board. You can see it pops through, but notice I'm rocking the entire table, like I'm really putting my weight into those cuts. So, you know, you hit a dull blade hard enough, it's going to cut through stuff no matter what. Let's see if we did any additional damage to the edge. That's really, I guess, the million-dollar question here. And those two cuts actually don't look too bad, but then it kind of goes downhill a little bit from here. Now, a big part of what I'm beginning to realize is the back half of the blade towards the handle. So that in the front, okay, but that back half towards the handle, it's in really rough shape. So did the rope do that? Maybe, because when I put it up on the board, I was using the back end of the rope. I'm going to have to, call this a 5. I still think that's being somewhat generous. It cut. It did okay. It's a 5. Let's check it out on the board. There's really only one position, like I said, to grip this knife in. And that is behind that little choil, the flipper, when it comes around there, almost like a finger guard. It does bite into the wood pretty good. I'm testing ergonomics as much as anything, and maybe even more than anything. So that thin edge of the knife digs in a little bit in your thumb. The pocket clip, because it's sat up in the back of the knife and not the center of the knife. You may have seen I had some issues with that. A little bit of a hot spot there. Gave up on the wood pretty easy. Let's just see how it does on paper. And this is the crazy thing, y'all. Y'all have seen this on like the last several tests. It gets duller and duller all the way through until I do the wood cutting, and the wood cutting realigns that fine edge of the blade somehow, and it actually cuts better. So I'm just kind of mad at the knife at this point in time. So I'm going to give it a 6.5. Y'all could have called that a 7. I think it would have been fair enough to call it a 7. I'm just mad at this knife overall. So there you go, 6.5. The strop, I would expect, since it got dull so easy, it should strop back pretty easy. I've got a double-sided strop here. The rough side I'm using now with the brown is a 16 micron diamond emulsion. I'm going to flip it over here in a second. If you watch really quick, I'll rub this off on my shorts really quick in between those. I did slow that down before in a video. I do wipe it a little bit. This is a 6 micron, the green side. I am going to kind of be disappointed when this runs out. That's a spray emulsion. It takes a lot of that stuff to coat the strop. So we're back in pretty good shape. You know, it's not great, but it's certainly a heck of a lot better than it was. It's obviously cutting relatively cleanly through the paper, although it's kind of a rough edge. Still not great. I'm going to call that an 8, and we're going to move on. All right, let's do the stats here and bring this thing on home. This is far right side in blue is the test I did today, along with the last 10 or 11 tests that we did. I got the prices of the knives. This is a Spyderco Positron Replica. It's actually a very old model of Spyderco. They still charge $35 for it. We'll talk about the value in just a minute. I have no idea what the real steel on this thing is. Usually it's an 8CR or 9CR. Because this is one of the older knives in their collection, I'm going to be more inclined towards an 8CR. And because of the results I got, they probably didn't heat treat this one all too well. So I have no idea what knife steel nerds would rate that 𝗥𝗲𝗃 because we don't know what the steel is. I did not sharpen this knife first. That does always make the test work better, but I didn't do it on this one. I gave it a 9 out of 10 starting off. We did 390 square inches of cardboard. At the end of that, I rated it a 6. Really kind of put a big dent in the edge. Did our 5 hose cuts. kind of worked out pretty okay. It was not too terrible, and still about a 6 after that. Then we did the rope cuts where it started falling apart even worse. You saw I did about 3 or 4 cuts on the table before I had to give up, raise it up on the board, and after that it dropped it easily down to a 5, maybe even worse, but I was generous at a 5. So there we are after our rope cuts at a 5. I did the wood test, and as often seems to be the case, especially maybe it was these cheaper knives, but a lot of y'all have actually given me a really good explanation in the comments, and I do appreciate that. Y'all let me know what that is and why it's doing it like that. So it's realigning the edge somehow. The wood is able to, it's almost like the edge curls over, it bends over a little bit on a microscopic scale, and the wood straightens it back out, and that's why it looks sharper again. Oh, let's bring this on home. Really, all in all, I am not a big fan of this knife. It feels cheap in the hand. I kind of mentioned that at the beginning. Had a poor factory edge to begin with. I didn't sharpen it. The edge retention, as we saw, was pretty disappointing. It's not really even a very ergonomic knife, although it is contoured in carbon fiber. It's certainly very light in the hand. It's not uncomfortable. It's not terrible, but like even the edges, the corners are not really well chamfered or rounded off, and that may just be this replica copy. They may have just done this so long ago. It was back in the day when they were making cheap replicas, and that may be what I got here. That's kind of what it feels like. The little front choil on there is kind of useless. They wasted a ton of space. It's not a sharpening choil, and it's sure as heck not a finger choil unless you like cutting your fingers. Not fidgety. The liner lock is, you know, it's okay. It did okay, but it's not going to drop shut or anything like that. This is certainly not a knife you want to fidget with all day. It's just not fun in that regard. The only real benefit to this knife is that it's super lightweight. The carbon fiber is nice. There's no steel liners or anything in it, I don't think. It's a small size. I lied. There are nested steel liners. They do have a little bit of milled out for weight reduction. I'm sitting here looking at it right now. Small size, easily disappears in the pocket. You know, overall, very small in the hand, small in the pocket, very lightweight with a nice 3-inch blade. I mean, this is a great weight to blade length ratio. So you're getting a good 3-inch blade in a very small, easy to carry package, right? But this whole thing just felt kind of low quality right from the start. There are just way too many better options out there for 35 bucks in this kind of a market. There's a lot of other designs and knives and replicas on OK Knives even that are much better quality. This just overall, like I said, it kind of feels like an old design, which it really is, and maybe an old replica that they made, you know, 8-9 years ago when they just were getting started. They didn't put a lot of time and attention into really building a high quality replica. They've had them sitting around forever. Even like the carbon fiber is rough. It's not kind of sanded as smooth and polished as many of the other ones I've gotten from them. So kind of just an old design with a very low quality, 𝗏𝐶R13. Now, is it horrible? No, it only went down to a 5 after these tests, and that's a pretty good usage, you know, more than most knives get in a week or so, and you could strop it back up pretty easily because it's a soft enough steel. So, you know, for a low cost, you want a nice carbon fiber, small, pocketable, disappears in the pocket, that'd be fine. But overall, we've seen way too many knives at this price especially that are just better. So I gave it a 4 on the edge retention, and likewise a 4 on the EDC. So now I'm curious to know if any of y'all ever bought this knife. I don't think I saw very many comments of people who said, oh yeah, I bought the Positron. You know, it has historical value. It's interesting a little bit, but this one, actually, when I finish the test, I'm going to put it back in the box, and this is going into my upcoming giveaway, so maybe one of y'all can take it and give it a try for yourself and see what you think about it. But if anybody's bought this, I'd love to see, did you have the same experience? How did your steel hold up? Have you put it through any kind of good usage and to see whether or not, you know, the edge is going to hold up? Always love hearing from you guys anyhow. Otherwise, if you have any good information, knowledge you want to share in the comments, I enjoy that as much as anything else. I love hearing from you guys and checking in. I'll be back next week. Oh, by the way, before you go, if you hadn't already, hit me a thumbs up. That really helps out. If you haven't
subscribed, I'd love to have you join our little band of renegades. There's not too many channels on the internet that are reviewing and testing these kind of knives, so that really helps me out, but it'll also make sure, you know, when all of my other videos come out, that you'll get to see them. I've noticed lately YouTube is definitely not promoting, even to my followers, like you guys, my regulars who are watching all of these videos every week, they're not even putting them in your feed anymore. I see even all my regulars starting to drop off. So I miss you guys. If you see this video, come back, throw me a thumbs up, check in, let me know y'all are doing all right. Otherwise, thanks so much for being with me today, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.